Welcome. Today you're going to hear a woman's perspective on saving seeds and storytelling for survival. Historically, women have had a very vital role in sustaining civilization, but that role has been vastly underrated. Actually, women have been responsible for reconstituting and revitalizing societies that have been perhaps doomed if it had not been for their ability to save seeds and to tell stories. I'm recalling an event about 5 years ago. I was in Mexico for an interfaith dialogue, and I met with a group of indigenous women, and they were discussing what they consider the threat to their being able to transmit these values, both of connection to the earth, saving seeds, telling stories about their culture, is that their children have become involved in Western culture, and their children are not interested in hearing the stories. And they feel so frustrated because in some cases also because of the relationship between men and women, when they get together in the communities, the men still have a more important place. And so they are disrespected on some level for being women. And then what they have brought throughout the ages, that special connection to the land and storytelling, is being dissed by their children, and they're not able to transmit the values or the wisdom of health, of using the plants to get over the modern diseases. And so they feel on both sides that, both from a male-female point of view and also with their children, they're kind of caught in this bind of not being able to be fully who they are and to keep that part of the tradition alive. So I was very moved by that. And I was thinking about how in our own culture, in our own society, all the great technological advancements, as wonderful as they are, as helpful as they are, have also created a disconnect between people, even though we seem to be more in contact with people, like 4,000 new friends on Facebook that I never met. But there's something about the technology which has interrupted that natural flow that you have all spoken about from your own cultures. And so I'd like to go to the next question, which is, what do you think metaphorically are the seeds that now we have to plant for tomorrow's future? What is it in particular? What can we do as women and as people who recognize this interconnectedness that we've spoken about? So let's start this time with Claire.
This is, I guess, my sweet spot. I truly believe in the power of storytelling. I truly believe that the predominance of a Hollywood science fiction future, which is only populated with high-rise buildings, zipping things, moving across the sky. Typically, the sky is always dark. People are always beyond some area zone, which is in a fence off somewhere. You very rarely, I think, except for the film Back to the Future. Back to the Future might have been the only futuristic film set in modern times that is not a negative impact of the future. Most futurist films, science fiction films, are dark, if you think about it. And so because our stories, words have power, and the Bible says, in the beginning was the word and the word was made flesh. I truly believe that when we see these stories and nobody's taking the time to write optimistic, not Pollyanna, but optimistic, positive, still some complexity, because that's harder to write. It's very hard to write an optimistic story about the future, which has the tension and the drama that the movies require and blockbuster films require. So I think what has to happen for me is, I really think each and every one of us who are in the business of trying to make change, in the business of trying to create a more hopeful future, what I call a thriving future, a flourishing future, should get away from getting so absorbed by the techno futures that is the popular thing, and everybody wants to be, talking about, oh, we're going to elongate life with, what do you call it? Implants and all this thing in our brain. I'm like, wait, it doesn't have to go like it. It really drives me crazy. This is almost like this zeal for abnormal lust for what I call the bright, shiny lights of the future. So I have a habit of saying, no, well, wait a minute. I would like to, certainly if I live to be, 95 years old, to enjoy a mango 30 years from now, like a real mango, not a simulated mango in the metaverse. I would really like to know that children who are born today could actually go to a real beach, not like a simulated beach in a metaverse. There's this almost glee, and I call it an unholy glee, attached to science and technology, that we have to have a much stronger force around. I think this is where the faith community has to lock arms. So whether you're in the temple or the mosque or in the church or the whatever, we need to lock arms and say, we are going to drive home positive stories, not Pollyanna stories, not we will overcome and there will be peace and harmony, because we know it's not going to happen in the next 30 years. But we have to drive home enough positive stories. So when I talk about smart futures for the flourishing world, I'm talking about not only designing a plan or a policy, but always whenever you are in the space of designing a project, a process, a product, talk about how the future with this product is going to look and how it's going to save somebody's life or provide someone with a job or make sure we have enough water. And yes, those people 30 years from now will still have a challenge to maybe fight against, but not in this dark way where most of the world is locked up in some era 29, 69 or something. And then there's this haves and have-nots or whatever, because the more we push that narrative out, is the more likely we are to do it. And I say this not just as a theory, I have proven that theory of change. Because in 2016, when I wrote my story, Moon Runnings, the life and times of the first Jamaican on the moon, a fun story. I was romping and talking about being on the moon and starting the Space Goodwill Games and all this drama. At that time, I was only performing that story as a tool for talking about planetary consciousness and talking about advancing the global sustainable development goals. However, when I was hit with some information about space and space data being privatized, and I thought about what it would mean if small countries had no access to the free data from NASA, I went into full gear. And because I'd written that story from the future, it's almost as if my brain had already seen what to do. So today, I'm now heavily active in the space agenda. I'm now in the space community. And I'm in a room when people are talking about, well, we're going to have land rights on the moon and we're going to practice the law. And I went, wait. First of all, why you're saying land rights of the moon? Does the moon have land? The moon has a surface area. Let us not use terms to describe something that we have not yet agreed on should be, so we can then perpetuate the Western capitalist, predatory capitalist model to take it into space. And for me, this is very, very serious. I'm very committed to advancing this conversation. And that's why I talk about how do we create, as a people of faith and interfaith community, a new covenant, not just for Earth. If we don't get on board and have a new covenant for the cosmos very fast, we're going to look up and find that the powers that be have decided to carve up space the way they carved up Africa and carved up Latin America and everywhere else. And we'll be saying, wait a minute, when did this happen? So I'm in a room holding the door open with my little self. I don't have any clout, but at least I try to ask a question. Whenever I hear something that makes me go, I try to put on my pretty face and not show my girl face, which is antagonistic. And I try to ask the question in a more polite, smiling fashion. When instead I'm going like, oh my God, we're going on that road. So for me, I have proven that when you craft a story from the future in which you have invested thoughtful consideration, that it's not a fantasy, that story you have written is actually plausible. You are literally writing the future into being, because I am living a story that I wrote in 2016. All the work I'm doing now in space is part of what I wrote in 2016 with no intention of doing it. But when I was called up, I could say, oh yeah, I should do this because I already had thought it through. And yes, some things are different, but I find that I'm seeing the answers easier. So storytelling and storytelling about the future is a very powerful tool for us ensuring that we create the community of practice within the faith community is going to be intentional about teaching from the pulpit, teaching from the head, people in the pews and the benches, what we ought to be doing about having what Audrey talks about, that sacred relationship, to restoring, to redeeming what we have sold, redeeming ourselves from the path of self-destruction. And yes, we're going to evolve into something different, but let's hopefully, if we come together as people of faith, we can evolve into something even more beautiful.
The unity that exists, the common ground that exists between the world's religions exists. If you just look at the part of and a large part of it is the people of the book, Jews and Muslims and Christians, love the Creator, whatever you choose to call it, love the Creator, do good and be good. I mean, those are very grounded principles. We can look at Buddhism; it teaches all that is good, all that is right, and Sufism, all of it. The indigenous religions, I think, had the right idea in the very beginning, and we're getting back to that and beginning to understand and see that the principles of everything is connected. It is all one, is where we're moving, but our educational system has not shifted back to the remembrance, to the idea of maintaining the mystic and the wonder in science. That's why scientists went into science in the first place. We need to teach why the plants grow, the wonder of all that, instead of dissecting everything into its minuscule parts. That creates a division of spirit and body when we are all one. I in my book Through the Dark, when I lost my sight in 2009, I was on the border, on the edge of death. And so I'm a miracle. The fact that I'm here, I'm a miracle. And the way of getting through that was by using the spiritual tools, by using the spiritual grounding and damn good medicine. It was a combination of both. It wasn't a division between the two. It wasn't an argument between what was going to work, faith or medicine. Both together, because God is in everything. The divine presence is in everything, and you and me and each of us.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. I'd like to ask Audrey to speak next to this topic.
The metaphorical seeds that need to be addressed are really and recognized are the beautiful artistry that is contained in the poetry, our myths and legends and fables that tell the stories of where we came from and poses the continuous tensions of the forces of dark and light and the constant play of the duality of opposites, the good, the bad, the happy, the sad, the pessimistic, and the optimistic, and ultimately the ethical moral resolution that speaks to justice and doing the right thing and taking personal responsibility for our conduct and ultimately the legacy that we are leaving now and to future generations. So, I believe it was Anita who spoke about the young people not really wanting to hear the stories of the ancestors and the wisdom of the ancients. And, that is really a great deal of sadness that comes about because we are basically not able to pass on the seeds of this wisdom, the seeds of where we came from as a portent of where we're going, and seeds that carry the rich history of our ancestors. And they not only hold present value, but a legacy for the future generations. So it is important that we be able to have the young people understand the importance of having these seeds, the metaphorical ones and the storytelling. All of that is so important. And similarly, metaphorical seeds that must be passed to future generations are frankly deeply connected to the past. Rowan White, who's a traditional seed keeper of the Mohawk tribe, says seeds are not only the foundation of agriculture, but also repositories of memory encompassing the land, climate, weather, cultural values, aesthetics, and stories of people. So preserving the earth for future generations is of utmost importance. in light of the far-reaching consequences of what we're facing with now, which is a real existential threat of climate change. So these rising temperatures and the sea levels, of course, I'm very conscious of sea levels because I come from Hawaii, which is an island, archipelago, really has intensified the dramatic changes that we are facing. So, we have to be able to bequeath this knowledge to future generations, as well as demonstrate what is occurring now to ensure our sustainability. So nurturing the seed of environmental well-being is an imperative that really demands unwavering commitment and transformative action. And really, the spiritual values, practices, and beliefs must be passed on to our children, because it is the values that we are talking about, and the ethics, and how we resolve ethical dilemmas. And this is what the fables are about, Aesop's fable, and all of the stories of kindness and compassion and being present for each other in times of need. So really, in a world consumed by instant gratification, materialism, and external validation, it is really tempting for individuals to seek their worth externally. But it's really a futile pursuit. And it's vital to teach children that their value lies within.
I love what everyone said, and I concur. And the seeds are everything that you're saying, for me, rings true. As early as 3.5, I remember dreaming, and I still have this dream today. And what I saw in my dream is the earth and all these stick people, different sizes and different colors. And what was really amazing about this dream is that our hands were on each other's hearts. And I remember in kindergarten when they asked what you're going to be when you grow up, I drew that. And unfortunately, my mom, my grandmother, my family, very much into dreams. So we would share those. And I remember the kids laughing. I remember the teacher saying, "Put away your crayons." But something happened at 5 there where I felt my feet going into the ground and my head going up into the sky. And I didn't have any more language for it. I didn't know it meant a PhD. I didn't know it meant being an organizational scientist in the human systems. I didn't know it meant being an author and all these things. I know that to be true, that I am to connect hearts all over the world. And that dream has persisted. And so I think one of the things kind of concurs with what Claire is saying, but also it's true with what Audrey is we are living and have to be present to what is happening. So what we're seeing is all of the stuff that is about total disarray, destruction, and on and on. What we're not getting much unless we gather, unless we share the stories of how those things have always been happening, now in a much bigger level since we've caused this global warming. But the good news is then that means we can change it and we can't waste time. But that we also need to have the dreams. Michael Beckwith, a friend of mine, he always talks about pain pushes until vision pulls. And so I agree with you, Dr. Claire, that vision for me. And again, it doesn't mean we're doing some kind of spiritual bypass, but it means, yes, I can see what's happening. Yes, I might look PhD and all this stuff, but I had wonderful childhood in one aspect, another horror on another, with 9 years of keeping a dark secret of sexual abuse. And that kind of level of abuse continues to women. Men, it happens too, but the numbers are horrific. It all needs to stop, that were owned. And I kept that secret, only to be followed at 13 with the race-related murder of my father, who was dark-skinned, indigenous Mexican person. And his life was taken. He was shot because he was at the wrong place in the 60s, where a black man and white man had a fight earlier in the day. And the white man returned and just saw the profile of my dark-skinned father and fired 3 bullets and killed him. So it isn't all like, everything's together. And, I've been trained, and so many of us are becoming aware that we're all ultimately indigenous. We're all of the earth and of the cosmos. We're all of this. We have come with different earth suits. And then our other relatives are part of with the reciprocity. We wouldn't be here without them. If we were only two-leggeds that were here, human beings, it would not be enough. We need the plants and everything. So yes, life is like this. And for those of you watching, it is. And I don't want to pretend that it's always like so wonderful and great. But guess what? When you have that dream, when you have that vision, you don't spiral downward. You might cry. I'd still cry. Thank goodness. For years, as a teenager, I couldn't cry. That's a blessing. I can cry. I can see the tears of my ancestors and that all the gifts they give to keep going on. And I get to be a future ancestor. Next month, I'm going to be a grandmother for the first time. And that child is going to learn all the stories that my sons learned, that I share with people all over of different faiths and beliefs in different parts of it. And I listen. So I listen to hear their stories. I am listening with the softest part of my ears, and my heart's expanding as I'm here, Ruth, with all these wonderful women, because this is life-giving, and that we get to choose to pass on. So I always say what we need to do is dream, 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 and keep dreaming. So many people I meet, young and old, they're like, I don't even remember when you tell that story about dreaming. And they're generally people who come over to me and say, you shouldn't, it makes you look unprofessional. I'm like, and then usually the CEO or somebody else comes over and says, thank you. I forgot my dreams. I need to remember again. I just feel all this responsibility, so I forget. We need all of this. We need to be present to what is. And part of what is this amazing part of the seeds in our heart, the plants, all of the elements of earth and the cosmos that draws us to those things not seen, as Yolanda was talking, but hoped for, that it is real. Because in my dream, this all was happening. And I was a poor child in the middle of a really economically poor neighborhood in Kansas City, and all the violence, no one wanted to live there. And I was the only non-Black person in this neighborhood. And I am so glad for that time, those 16 years, because then all of the crud about dark-skinned people makes no sense to me. No sense to me. But we have to listen. If we can't live with each other, we need to listen to each other's stories around the world.
I think what we're starting today is a new coalition, a new coalescence, if you will, where perhaps we can leave here with something concrete that we can say, okay, what do we take back? What can we make happen now that we have met each other? What is the cause for that? The one thing we can do together to begin to put, because let's face it, Global Sustainable Development Goals does have a space for peace and justice and partnership, Goal 16 and Goal 17. It's just that we as an interfaith movement have not necessarily been as assertive and intentional about using that space that's there in the global goals for making these things happen. And that's why I'm committing the interfaith movement to really push this out and to let's get together and do something, especially in September when the UN is having a conversation on what should the global future look like. And this big issue, saving our planet, saving our blue marble, the only blue marble that we know right now. I don't care what moving to Mars and having fantastic habitats. Right now, we must concentrate our efforts on whatever we do in space must benefit our life here in this beautiful blue marble we call our home planet Earth.
If we could just but practice what our different faith systems are, we would be much better off as we go to the moon. But we need to take care of this planet. I remember meeting Rusty Schweiker many years ago, and he had come back from the moon, and he was telling us that everything changed for him when he looked at, as they were reapproaching Earth, to see this beautiful planet. And you got the sense that it was alive and well, and it is. And we have to nurture that and nurture these seeds that we're all talking about, which include, taking in spirit, inspiration, taking in temperance, kindness, mildness, joy, praise, all these things that we've been taught, but we now have to bring back into remembrance. And yes, meet the challenge of being disconnected from the past and from the real stories that can heal and make us whole and help us thrive, not only survive, but thrive.
So the metaphoric seeds we must pass down to future generations are similar to the sacred agricultural seeds in that cultural knowledge, values, beliefs, and practices that should be retained and nurtured rather than forgotten. and they serve as a foundation for a sustainable and connected future, ensuring that our heritage and wisdom continue to thrive, which is why it's so important to have seed banks, literally and metaphorically.
I'm excited. This is the most important time to be alive at this time. And I'm so just grateful to everyone, young and old. It's just such an important time that what our thoughts are, what we say, what we do, all of it matters. So if we're not sure, pause and listen some more, not only outside, but to the sacred inner, to the plants, the trees, the rocks, the water, everything. And then we will find our way forward individually, but collectively, because we do nothing alone.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening, joyful, inspiring time with all of you. And I want to now turn to the audience who will be watching and listening to these words of wisdom. And I want to ask the audience, what stories will you be telling? What seeds are you going to save to sustain civilization and to keep humanity alive and thriving? Thank you so much for coming today. And I hope this will generate many conversations around the globe, and especially in partnership, men and women in partnership. Thank you. God bless you.
Let's go ahead and open the floor with the question that Ruth just posed to us as a starting point, and then we can come back to maybe some other questions on top of that. Her question was, what stories are you wanting to tell? Are you telling? What seeds are you wanting to nurture?
And this needs to be brief in order to watch the second video and have any time after that too. So.
Okay, so how much time would you say we've got before this we start the second video, Mary Grace?
Like 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Because otherwise we'll be late. Yeah.
Okay, let's just collect a couple. Pamela, you got one?
Yeah, I'm working on something called the Super Duper Senior Citizen. And it's a combination of writing about the super duper senior citizens and possibly being on stage, telling stories and with the audience about super duper senior citizens.
Thank you.
There's not too much talk about that, and can be marvelous stuff going on with super duper senior citizens.
The storyteller, story keepers, the elders. All right. Anybody else? A quick one. What story seeds are you, Bill?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, and thank you, Ruth, for putting this whole just magnificent presentation. Thank you so much. In my small way, I'm working with a series, a YouTube series, which I think you're mostly familiar with, and we have kind of expanded from an American point of view to an international point of view, and it's the stories of different cultures: Mexican American, South American, Persian. We're starting to get there, so it's inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and go to the second or the fourth part of this, the next video, and then we'll open up some time afterwards for some more conversation. And everybody go on mute if you will, please.
Welcome. Today you're going to hear a woman's perspective on saving seeds and storytelling for survival. Historically, women have had a very vital role in sustaining civilization, but that role has been vastly underrated. Actually, women have been responsible for reconstituting and revitalizing societies that have been perhaps doomed if it had not been for their ability to save seeds and to tell stories. We've been speaking from a woman's perspective, but how do we engage men to be our partners in this endeavor? And of course, there are many men that are already engaged with us, but still, we have a ways to go. The battle of the sexes is still raging in many parts of the world. Women are not allowed to vote in every part of the world yet today. And these are such crucial matters of survival for the entire planet. From your experiences, what has been the best way for you to engage men as partners in this sacred activity? Let's start with Yolanda first.
I think we have to make friends with them. We need to let them know that they're loved and respected and cared for, and that we see a disconnect. We see a disconnect that is ongoing. We've had much forward movement, but now we're seeing a terrific, in this country, in the United States, we're seeing a terrific reversal of respect for the uniqueness and the importance of, women in this society. So I think in this country, we're having more challenge in a way because we've moved so far technologically. We've become so highly materialistic. We've let go of a lot of the remembrance in this kind of materialistic point of view, that we need to reconnect, and we need to invite men to sit down to lunch, to dinner, to talk. And I think we probably need to build some more, discussion groups to facilitate that. We can have conversations. I've had some lovely conversations with total strangers, probably more easily than with people that I know. Maybe we need to do more of that with the people that we know, to let them know the pain, to let them know the importance of how we need to be allowed to express and to share our gifts, and to have a partnership, a true partnership that is nurturing for both people, instead of the ongoing antagonisms that were occurring. It's very frustrating to see our time right now in the United States going backwards in so many ways, and that this collegiality, this friendship, which is the vital part of any kind of relationship, respect, again, it's these qualities that we need to bring back to the table to integrate into our lives, because we can't move forward without practicing them, without the, and without the tenderness, without the mildness, without the kindness, without the compassion that is so vital to human relations. So we need to talk to each other more, and we need to pray with and for each other more. We can get there. And if we see that this is the goal, if we set the intention, we can accomplish that, because we're constantly co-creating. Where the thoughts are things, what we pay attention to is what we get. And so it's important to focus and set the intention. We're going to change this, and we're going to have true partnership and true appreciation one for the other in our society, in our laws, and in our world.
Thank you. Thank you, Yolanda. Claire, how do we best engage men as our partners? What's your secret?
I have, certainly because I grew up in engineering, I've always had a very good relationship with some men. And I've been looking at that because I grew up with an absent father. So I would say, some emotional issues around male authority and male control. My mother told me at 12, when I was confronted by an elder in the Jamaican community for what he considered was my awful behavior, but not apologizing. She tells me a story of myself at 12 terrorizing this gentleman was very much to be feared. And the incentive was that his son had basically teased me because I stuttered. And so I basically, at 12, dropped a Jamaican bad word in the chat. Long story short, they said I should apologize. Now I'm 12, his son is like 19. He has no business. I'm 11 actually. Why is he teasing an 11-year-old? So I said I'm not apologizing, but I did say I'm sorry. I said I'm sorry, but I'm not. I apologize, but I'm not sorry. So I was living with this gentleman. My mother comes back home from Wales. She was studying, and I'm now being brought on the carpet for all the infractions in her absence. My mother said, I stood up, in Jamaican women, African women, sit with their hands on your kimbo, right? And I put my hands on my hips and I planted my feet. And I opened my eye and I steam. I said, no man must boss me. he said, even he went, okay, Claire Nelson, daughter of Asneth Osborne Nelson. All right, I hear you. Calm down, so I really went off. And I tell that story because it's interesting that today in my 2 nonprofits, I have so many men around me who really, I think, when I look at what it is about a relationship, these men in particular are excellent fathers and excellent fathers of daughters. I don't know if I went seeking them out to fill a gap in my own life, but we have a relationship where with them I feel nurtured. I really feel with those particular groups of men, I can have open conversations about the other men who have like disrespected me in public, said things about me behind my back to destroy my ministry. I consider my nonprofit work in the Caribbean community, in the Futures community, my ministry, right? I don't have a church because I've decided to put my time there in the secular space, but I operate from that mindset. And I feel if I was to think about how do I actually institutionalize this process, perhaps, I would then say, you know what, let me call these men first who are already in my space, already in a position of trust, already who think of me as somebody who's worth listening to, or already support me, and ask them to bring a friend, right? And then create this circle where we can then talk about some of the issues, whether it's the environment issue, whether it's the leadership, who should lead, when to step back, how to co-partner, the way you can co-parent, all of these things. But I think I would start intentionally with the men who are already around me, who respect me. And I have found that most of those men that are around me and treat me that way are the fathers of daughters. So as I said, I don't know if I've picked them because I'm looking for something, but in my experience, those are the people I would start with. And one last thing very quickly, I had the opportunity to have a conversation with a rabbi talking about reproductive rights. And that was a very unusual thing. Here it is, a rabbi talking to Christian women about reproductive rights. But we had a wonderful conversation. And it's because he really is comfortable in his masculinity and his space. But we had this conversation there too. How do we bring more men to the table? So I think it will take some intention. And perhaps what I have learned from being married is that sometimes we as women have to go first. It's just not in the nature of some men. They just can't. So we have to surrender in a sense in order to open the space. So I've learned how to surrender my fierceness to some extent, especially with my husband. If I want to bring him to the table, I have to surrender and become softer so he doesn't have his antagonistic thing up, so I can get to the other end of what I'm trying to get to. And I think in this, our emotional intelligence as women, really we can use that to convene these spaces, allow the men to feel heard, because they're feeling also put upon. They don't have the upper room, or their testosterone has nowhere to go in this new world. So we have to find a way to give them room to also emerge into better versions of themselves as the world continues to change.
Yes, Audrey, please share with us, how do we best engage men as our partners in this noble adventure?
Well, thank you so much, Ruth, for that question. Now, just as men need us, the women need men too. And it is the bringing together of the seeming pair of opposites that actually are the co-creative principle cycles of life. So the qualities of women being caregivers, tending the hearth of home, where the heart is, must also be magnified for men, because fundamentally all people, whether men or women, need love and to be loved. And, to really feel the depth of their meaning and purpose in life, and which is love. And frankly, God is love. So if we want to actualize the living reality here and now of the divine, we can know that the living God exists in every loving thought, word, and deed, as was expressed previously by one of our powerful speakers. We really need to deconstruct calcified thinking that keep us in certain gender identities that are siloed in our activities that have been historically attributed to gender. And for example, since we have had broad discussion today and quite extensive discussion about the importance of the existential threat of climate change and degradation of climate, one way to engage men is to reframe environmental issues to resonate with the masculine identity. And this is exemplified by an article on the website Sustainable Brands, How Framing Sustainability as Strength Can Help Win Male Audiences. So, but a larger issue that we must address is this concept about caring. And caring is not masculine. It is not feminine. It is the important principle of being able to sustain our lives because we care about each other. So values like caring actually transcend gender. And certain characteristics like caring and compassion are associated with femininity, but it isn't acceptable to keep these qualities that are so important for the generative life force to be, skewed in preferential treatment or identification with any one gender. It is important for both genders. And it's desirable that men and women foster these important virtues. So we should embrace the characteristics that will help the environment and our communities and each other to thrive, regardless of whether they're deemed masculine or feminine. So in an article about toxic masculinity and climate change, Ethan Olson writes, we can recognize masculine behavior that is good for our planet and provide it as a counterpoint for boys and men who otherwise might veer towards extreme toxic behavior that rejects all hints of feminine influences. So the point is not to disparage boys for wanting to be masculine, but to remind them that respecting and being in touch with feminine ideas, their feelings, their sense of worth does not make them any less of a man. So in fact, it makes us truly human beings who are the embodiment in reality of love, and that generative force of love itself, and that transcends all gender. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Audrey. And we're going to go to Nita to answer the last of these questions.
Yes, I love that question, Ruth. And I've been asked it because I often find myself in rooms of men, and then they hear the stories of women and the level of abuse and how we've tried for decades to help them rise up in business as leaders, and just all the difficulties. And then they'll ask, well, we've heard so much, it's kind of overwhelming. What is it that you want us to do? And there isn't one answer, right? We're much more complex than that. But one of the things that came through to me, and I feel like it just came right up through the Mother Earth, and I have found men spend some time with that. I said, well, do what is yours to do. You just need to check in. So whether it's whatever it is that's guiding you, you get involved, whatever what that is. But first and foremost, to make this change, I'd like you to look within yourself, get help from someone you trust, or make someone that you trust, but look within yourself and find a space for all that is feminine within yourself. All that we have now classified as female, as feminine, the collaboration, the caring, oh my gosh, the four-letter word love, forgiveness, cooperation, even joy and happiness. That's more familial. That women, that's the thought. Find the place that you can embrace that, because until you can embrace that, and it's not just arrive, but just keep working it, you will find you'll be able to be in relationship with all the members of the human community. And I don't just mean that as man and woman, because we have that continuum that's gone much, much larger. We're understanding, just like the plant world that has all different kinds of identifications, not just he and she, but all of them, they and them, now all of that. When you find that, then you will. And some of them have really struggled with that and began to working and listening. And I found that it has really made a difference. So it's hard to care about something that you can't find within yourself. You'll only go so far. That's what we're trying to remember now in this whole conversation, that we are part of the earth. We're part of nature. We're part of all the relatives. And when we know that, and there's this reciprocity, we wouldn't be here without them, and they would, and we need to give back for them to be here with our carbon and everything else that as we breathe out and other things. But nonetheless, when we have that, then it's easier for us to sit in circle with each other rather than this old hierarchy, which we're already knowing it doesn't work. And let me say, I know even from the excavators that are causing so much damage to the earth, that's hurting the possibility and destroying seeds and all the other things that are happening, they too already know. But the force, that pattern just keeps going. So we need to speak up. And so it's an invitation, like Yolanda said, join us. But in every movement, almost every movement around the world, whether it's protecting the waters in North America, whether it's the Amazon, women are in the front. If it's in Europe, protecting the rivers there and the forests, all over the world, Asia, it's women. And so we need to support each other, sharing the stories, understanding that we are sacred. We have the power, we have the ability, and we do it together. That allows us to be heard in a different way. So I'm grateful for all the movements that have occurred. I'm grateful for the coming together of movements rather than having to create a new one. And that's why I get involved with things that already exist, because, oh my gosh, Pachamama Alliance or Pioneers or World Parliament of Religions. I mean, all of these different, this is like, we just need to put our voice out there and have that courage. So men, you are part of the two-leggeds. I want you to honor the masculine that's inside of me, and I want to honor the feminine inside of you. Because again, this separation that we make makes no sense. And what we can do when we get the resolution, even before we have the final, the ability to co-create, to be part of nature, to co-create, be part of the businesses and organizations we create, the communities, the religious groups, the spiritual groups, all of that, the possibilities are endless. And that's with Mother Earth, and the cosmos is calling out to us now to remember who we are in this one hoop of life. So welcome, men. Welcome the masculine, the divine masculine, the divine feminine. We need all of that.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening, joyful, inspiring time with all of you. And I want to now turn to the audience who will be watching and listening to these words of wisdom. And I want to ask the audience, what stories will you be telling? What seeds are you going to save to sustain civilization and to keep humanity alive and thriving? Thank you so much for coming today. And I hope this will generate many conversations around the globe, and especially in partnership, men and women in partnership. Thank you. God bless you.
Again, thank you, Dana and Ruth. So we did manage our time well. That gives us 15 minutes to have some conversation. And Ruth just restated the question from the close of part 3. So let's pick up on that if you want. What stories are you telling? And if you want to pick up on the other question about how to form effective gender partnerships, can also speak to that. So the floor is open. Go ahead, Paul.
So stories are really important in the work I do when I work with an executive team. One of the key themes is success stories. How did we succeed in this area or that area? You know, a business, of course. And it's 3 days of storytelling. Success stories, stories about things that didn't work. And as we gather the success stories, then we say, how can we implement this? How can we make this part of our organizational culture and so on? And I think that one of the things I discovered once, in order to get people to tell stories, I would have to tell my own story first as a model, and then people, you know, would share their stories. And, you know, at the end of 2.5 days, the level of consciousness just rises because you see possibilities. People can see possibilities you can't see. And so that's my experience of storytelling. It's just really the foundation, you know, for my work in business. And it works.
Thanks, Paul.
I noticed Jasmine and Amy had comments in chats that are really interesting. Maybe you'd want to speak to what you put in the chat, Amy or Jasmine.
Yeah, when she was talking about how women are the storytellers and the holders for everything, the first thing that just popped into my mind is a young girl. I mean, I think she was 8 when she really decided to fight for the world and to bring awareness to climate change. And that is that irony that she's a girl as well. And I'm sure there's boys out doing the same thing and men, but maybe it is collectively more women. I don't know, just something to think about. Thank you.
I guess I thought of Coffee because she was 11 when she won her Grammy, and I feel like music is such a universal language, but it's also a barrier. It cuts through a lot of red tape and a lot of our own kind of boundaries. It just breaks through a lot, and I feel like music is a way that we can not only get our message across, but also share our stories. So I thought of Coffee. Yeah.
Thank you. I myself took 3 pages of copious notes. I'm just overflowing with ideas about all of this. I'm not going to try to summarize it. I'm sort of flooded at the moment. Bill?
Sure. Thanks, Thomas. Again, thanks to Ruth for bringing this together. Just magnificent. And I actually am reflecting on something that Ruth mentioned today in the video, that technology has interrupted the natural flow, kind of echoed by Claire when she talked about our unholy attachment to technology. And then Anita in the very first video that we had watched, where she just made a passing reference to Monsanto and GMO. And I'd just like to share my horror at what we did as a country 20 years ago in Iraq, conquering the country and then trying to rule it with very stringent rules that were put in place where it was made illegal for farmers to save their seeds. Instead, they had to buy GMO suicide seeds from Monsanto. And that means that when you plant them, when you go to plant the second generation from the seeds, it dies. So it's just one generation, and there's no, and I just wanted to, people may not be aware of that, but I've been horrified by that for 20 years. And it's just an example of technology run amok. We think we know, and we ignore nature, and we ignore the natural flow, and have this unholy attachment there. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Maybe that sparks some thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Ruth put into the chat, what about changing our own personal story that we are continuously telling? Are we locked into our own stories? I will speak to that one because that's what I was writing about. In fact, I was making notes about how does my story that I've been telling myself change the more I learn about the science of the reality of not just climate change, but the decline of civilizations, the life cycle of civilizations, as the great unraveling. Joanna Macy's referred to it that way, and others have. So how does my story change when we're past the tipping point on things? Some things we're not, but other things we are already past the tipping point. A lot of species have gone extinct, for example. So what does that do to my story? And it just, one sense would be that I don't have energy to put into projects that deny the reality of the seriousness of where we currently are. And it forces my priorities and my thinking about what I'm going to do today. I used to be a big fan of space exploration, but that's completely out the window now. That's one example. So I'm in with that. Anybody else want to pick up on Ruth's question there? What are you doing with your own story? How is it maybe changing or evolving? Martha, you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm really involved with in helping people tell their stories through biographies. It's my favorite genre to read, and I help people write their biographies and get their memoirs down and that sort of thing. And I hadn't thought about it being something that could contribute to the collective. And so it was really food for thought today to think about maybe, because I've been struggling to find my lane sort of in that. So, but I'm going to think about it in terms of the rest of society or its benefit or helping the collective. I'm not sure where it's going, but that it resonated.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Jonathan had his hand up.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, on Fridays and Saturdays, I work at a recovery house in Hayward. And, you know, they refer to themselves as addicts. And it's always struck me, if I hold myself to something, meaning of what I've done in the past, that is still with me. And so I really am listening to and working with what story am I telling myself about myself? How do I really see myself? So, yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, go ahead, Pamela.
There was a moment where the phrase the man and the woman, the male and the female in the female, and the female in the male, and and that's a way that harmony can even increase, and working together can increase. And it got broadened in terms of the whole world, that if we're ever, whatever country we're in or whatever challenging situation we're in, if we can find one thing that is inside of us and is also inside of that person, and what's inside of the piece of what's inside of that person is inside of me, and there's like a magical connection thread. And I think one of the beauties of peace and love is the word connection. And so I love that idea, the male and the female, and the female in the male, and like that, and onward for the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? Sarah?
Thank you. I don't know if this is so much answering the question, but I really do want to acknowledge Ruth and Dana for putting this together. What an amazing, inspiring film. And it really, I took a lot of notes too, and it really made me think about how disconnected I am from my own roots and stories. And I'm really gonna think about what stories do I want to tell my nieces and nephews and the younger generations. And so really inspiring. Thank you so much. Great work.
Thank you. Mary Grace?
The whole story theme is really big in my personal living my life. You know, the stories I tell myself seem so real. Sometimes they are, mostly they're not. And paying attention to that dialogue in my head that I'll sometimes act on my story as if it's a fact, and then questioning myself, you know, is that true? We all have our prejudice. I certainly have mine, but it's not always visible to me until I identify, is this fact that my opinion I'm having, is this fact, or is this the story I'm telling myself? So stories have a particular significance to me personally. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to have two people on December 5th. Their title is Braver Angels Approach to Depolarization. And we'll break up in groups and talk about our stories and how they can be depolarizing, and finding ways to be able to connect. Because, I mean, from my point of view, our country is so depolarized. And how do I do that? What can I do to change that? So I think the whole topic of stories is really valuable.
I will look forward to that. The Mankind Project is sponsoring a Braver Angels training, I hope between now and then, for us to learn the protocols, the technology of that. It's very exciting.
Great.
Patricia?
I want to share an experience that I had that it became a story that I shared with others. When I was in my 30s, I did not have any idea of spirituality or anything. So I visited Bali in Indonesia, which is everything is beautiful, everything, the people, the landscapes, everything. But in the streets, there are these dogs with mange, and they come into the restaurants because the restaurants do not have walls. They have columns to hold the roof because it's so hot. So you're eating, you're enjoying this beautiful environment, and then you see this dog with mange walking between the tables. That ruins the whole experience. And I share this with this Indonesian man, Balinese man, and he said, "Oh, so what do you want to do about it?" And I said, "I think you have to get rid of the dogs." God, I know, I feel so bad, but this is me before knowing anything. And he said, oh, you Westerners want to have everything under control, but we need the dogs. And I said, how come? What happens is, if there are no dogs, there is no rice. The dogs eat the rats who eat the shoots of the rice. So we need everybody in this cycle. You need to have the good and the bad. And that was such an incredible story, a learning experience, and I always share with others. This reminds me of that story.
Thank you, Patricia.